we will provide our 2023 NFL Team Power Rankings, counting down from 32 to 1. In this video, we'll reveal our number 16 to 9, and it's all coming up next. Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Lee.
And I'm Gary Kurtzman.
And I'm Michael Wiley, and we're the Fantasy Football Consultants. Folks, be sure to watch the other two shows that we put together, rankings Team 17 all the way through 32. But real quick, we'll tell you who we've got left for this show and the next show, which is Baltimore, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Dallas, Detroit, Jacksonville, Kansas City, LA Chargers, Miami, Minnesota, New Orleans, New York Jets, Philadelphia, San Francisco, and Seattle. Eric, where are we going next?
Yeah, that was an alphabetical order, so not necessarily what our order here is. And if you enjoy this content, please help us out. Smash the like button. And if you haven't yet, hit the red subscribe button. Okay, at number 16. I mean, these are all teams that you probably are going to want to pick in NFL Survivor, but you better find the right matchup. Number 16 is Minnesota Vikings. Oh, I can hear that groan from Minnesota. Like, we were 13-4 last year. Yeah, but you also were outscored by your opponents in total. Why? Because in their losses, guys, they were outscored by an average of 22 points a game, and they were 11-0. 11 of their 13 wins, 11-0 in one-score games. Gary, how do you break down this year's version of the Minnesota Vikings?
Man, I wish I could rank them higher. If anything, in my mind, maybe they deserve to be ranked a little lower. They were tied for third worst defense in the NFL last year. That's where you got to start, right? With the Minnesota Vikings. If they can, because they're not a powerhouse offensive team, they're not going to light up the scoreboard. They're not the Kansas City Chiefs or even the Chargers or. The fact of the matter is, these guys have an offense that relies upon their defense to keep it close, and it just can't do it. Boy, they squeaked out a huge statistical anomaly with one-score games. Otherwise, had they not done that, they could have had a losing record last year. Right? That's the bottom line. Now, they do have a top 10 offense. Kirk Cousins is not going to get any younger, and this is now the third straight offseason where I've heard meaningful talk about trying to trade him away and get some draft capital and pick a quarterback for the future, and we just don't seem to have any serious takers. So that tells you something about what the NFL landscape thinks about Kirk Cousins. Now, hey, they got Justin Jefferson, who is just hands down top 2 wide receiver in football, for all your Jamar Chase fans wondering who the other one is. And that'll get you a long way. Dalvin Cook's no longer there. I don't think that that's going to affect him much at all. I don't think that Dalvin Cook's going to get nearly the money of the free agent landscape that he thinks he will. I think their running game is going to be just fine, but I just don't see the dynamicism in this offense, even with Justin Jefferson, to be able to keep up with an atrocious defense. I got these guys ranked totally middle of the pack.
Michael?
Well, the big upgrade that they had this year was adding Brian Flores. I think, Miami's weird decision of letting him go was the Vikings' big gain. And so I think that will have an impact on how they run things. Defense, Brian Flores comes from the Bill Belichick school of defensive thought and has really shown that skill set. They didn't really have additions on the defensive side, so it's going to have to be in scheming. But I'm a huge fan of Kevin O'Connell. He comes from the Sean McVay school. So you could argue that so does Brandon Staley, who hasn't been that impressive. But I'm a big fan of his, and I think he'll find a way to put things together. I think this Jordan Addison addition out of USC is a huge upgrade from Adam Thielen in terms of making Justin Jefferson all the more effective. But I don't disagree. Brian Flores needs more than just a couple of months to get this defense ready. They need maybe a couple additions as well. They had one addition from the draft that looks like to be starting, Blackman at the cornerback position. So we'll see. It's going to be tough to repeat the 13-4. Eric?
Yeah, they kind of swapped cornerbacks. They lost Patrick Peterson, but they brought in Byron Murphy Jr. But I think the big thing that's going to hurt them is on their defensive line. They had a huge run stopper in Dalvin Tomlinson, who is gone. So that's why I think that, you're not going to see, besides just doing so well in close games, them approaching anywhere near 13-4. I think we got them at the right spot here, barely in the top half of the teams. We'll move on to number 15 is the New Orleans Saints. 7-10 last year, but the trend has not been good. They've gone from, in the last 4 years, to 13 wins, to 12 wins, to 9 wins, to 7 wins. But I think they got an absolute upgrade. Michael, I hope you'll agree with me, at quarterback in the Raiders, Derek Carr. The offensive line looks like it's going to be really good as long as it stays healthy. It features 4 first-round picks and 1 second-rounder. But I think it's going to come down to what the heck is happening with Alvin Kamara and his situation. And will Michael Thomas ever actually play? I feel like Charlie Brown and the football, every preseason they say Michael Thomas is ready to go. He'll be great, and every year he doesn't play. So those two guys, I think, are key to whether the success of this Saints.
Yeah, and don't forget the coaching change too, right? I mean, obviously we saw Sean Payton move on. They got Dennis Allen there. I guess Payton was gone the year before, but I think Derek Carr is a huge upgrade. He's getting older. He's obviously never completely recovered from some of the injuries, although you might say that he did look a little bit better even with the poor offensive line this last year. I'd like to see him do very well, because I was very disappointed with how he was treated by the Raiders. And I think he will have a better season. But the Saints are, like you say, they're kind of on a downward trend. We'll see if they can stabilize. I think that's the best they're going to do.
I think it's been years since Drew Brees, since we've had the Saints have a quarterback of the ilk of Derek Carr. I'm a huge Derek Carr fan. And they have a total stud in Chris Olave. I love this guy. I love Chris Olave. I think we're going to be talking about Chris Olave this year as a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. I really do. I think he is phenomenal. And so I see no reason why the Saints won't be genuinely good. I know that I definitely have ranked higher than you two, but that's a little bit of a color of why. And again, sure, does it all come down to Derek Carr? Absolutely. But I have no problem saying that Derek Carr is going to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And if he is, this team's going to be a top 10 team in the NFL.
At number 14, much to my chagrin that they fell down to 14. By the way, folks, if you are upset and you're from Detroit, that Detroit appears so soon, can I give your email out, Gary? Is that possible?
Hey, go ahead. Let he who has not a bottom 5 defense cast the first stone, though, right?
I have plenty of positive things to say about the Lions, but let's let you go. Talk about this 9-8 Lions team from last year.
Well, yeah, I mean, the good thing about the Lions is they've had a what I consider to be a very good offseason, but that's what you have to bank it on in order to rank the Lions higher than middle of the pack. Okay, they're middle of the pack because they have a pretty, not a very, but a pretty explosive offense to go with a pretty atrocious defense. That gets you middle of the pack. Okay. Now, I like their offseason additions. I don't know how much we want to talk about in detail in this video, but their defense should certainly be better. DeAndre Swift, I don't think they're going to miss a whole lot. Some people do. I get the dynamicism, but they're going to be just fine at running back. I'm still not sold on their quarterback, even though he's an alum of my University of California Golden Bears, right? And he's a year older now, which of course means he should theoretically regress because he's old. But the fact of the matter is, he's got dynamic receivers. Jameis Williams managed to get himself suspended again. Nice going there, pal. And that's going to hurt them. But, at the end of the day, I think if you want to bank Detroit being a top 10 team on their offseason acquisitions, I say prove it first.
Okay, almost nothing of what you said I agree with. No, one thing I do agree with is watch out for the Jameson Williams out 6 games. So for Survivor, less excited about picking Detroit in the first six games. They were not the same team at the end of the year that they were for most of the year. They were 8-2. The end of the season. They were playing some of the best ball in the NFL, and a lot of teams were really lucky that they did not make the playoffs, just missed it. So let's talk about their offense. They ranked 4th last year, and they're getting 8 starters back, and they added in the draft Jahmyr Gibbs, who I think will help them in the running and the passing game. And one thing that really has hurt this offense is ever since they let their tight end go to Minnesota, they now finally have a good replacement with Sam Laporta, who is a top 34 pick. So I love this offense. I'll talk about the defense in a minute, but Michael, what do you think about the Lions?
Yeah, actually, I was going to talk about the addition of C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think that's their biggest addition. I think their defense is what needed the biggest help. I wasn't super impressed with the draft class, but maybe I was reading different articles than you were. So I think the defense is where they needed to make changes, and I think the defensive backfield is where they made some really huge upgrades, and that will help. So I think they're going to battle it out with Minnesota to win the NFC North. Neither team's going to win a playoff game, I think, this year. But I think this team's on the up. A little bit of nervous about the quarterback position, but Jared Goff seems to be able to he's serviceable year in and year out if he's got a good surrounding core, and he does.
Yeah, full disclosure, I think I was the only one on that actually had this as a top 10 team with Detroit, and it was because of the improvements on defense. And Michael, I think that the draft class was so good because it was so huge. Some people didn't like what they did early in the draft, but they did some really good picks and a lot at the end of the draft. And I think they've got a lot of players. Linebacker Jack Campbell, safety Brian Branch were 2 guys that they drafted late, and they brought in quarterback Cam Sutton, and they also have Emmanuel Mosley. So a team that finished 32nd in yards allowed last year is definitely going to be better.
That's a hot take that a team that finished dead last is going to be better, Eric. That's the kind of hashtag analysis we need.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for that compliment. All right, at number 13, they were under 500 last year, but they got respect from this panel. The Cleveland Browns at 7-10. This has to be, guys, that we believe in Deshaun Watson, that he isn't the guy that he was last year with 6 starts and averaging 183 yards, 7 TDs and 5 interceptions. We think that was due to rust. And now he'll be the Deshaun Watson from Houston years. Is that it? What do you guys say?
That was it for me. I mean, look, here's the deal. They got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. What they need is a quarterback to put it all together. Their 7-10 was a mixture of bad quarterback play before and after Deshaun Watson and culture. And they fixed the culture issues with some administrative changes. And now they need to fix the quarterback issues. And Deshaun Watson has years of a CV that says that he's a very good quarterback. From everything from release time to reading the defenses and obviously an accuracy, and then obviously being able to use his feet, to get away from trouble. But anytime you have a very good defensive line, a very good offensive line, one of the best running backs in the NFL, a receiving core that is at least pretty good, and you have a good defensive secondary, you need to win ball games. It's that simple. You should win ball games. And I would argue that unless you think that Deshaun Watson has just lost it and that's it and it's over, then the Cleveland Browns should be a pretty good football team because every other aspect of their team is pretty good.
Yeah, you know me, I always like to talk about the coaching. I think Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator is huge for them. They added a couple guys out of Minnesota this year. They're going to even be a better defense this year. And I love this David Njoku guy. Tight end he is really impactful. I think Deshaun Watson will find a way to use him well, take advantage of the good running game. They went all in on Deshaun Watson. Maybe surprisingly so, given the circumstances. He's clearly athletic. He's clearly a big guy. Maybe he's going to compete with reaction time to to the Chicago Bears. But I think they're on the up and up. Tough division, but they're on the up and up.
All right, at number 12, the countdown of getting down to teams that we think that will really do well. At number 12 is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were 10-8 last year, but they finished strong, 6-1 in their last 7 games. I think we watched what we've talked about so many times, the maturation of a quarterback, right? That is not as good in their first couple of years. Trevor Lawrence is a star. He finished 10th in passing yards last year. Really saw some breakout performances by Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram. And now they add an incredible weapon in Calvin Ridley. So I love the passing attack of this Jacksonville Jaguar team. What do you guys think?
Good, Gary.
I like their running attack too, by the way. I think Travis Etienne is the real deal. And I'd be surprised, Eric, if he hasn't grabbed your attention about that. Oh,
didn't want to give it all away.
I'm a huge Trevor Lawrence fan. Don't forget, they were saying that he's the best quarterback to come out of the draft since Andrew Luck. That is, my friend, saying something. His maturation, that process is just continued exactly on pace. You would expect somebody like him to continue to get better in his first few years, and you can almost track the continued progression. If he makes that next step, as people think that he will, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Now you add great weapons for people you can throw to. They have a good offensive line. They have what I consider to be a very good running back, not catching out of the backfield, but strictly in the Nick Chubb, era of run, or Derrick Henry era of running the ball, actually running between the tackles. He is phenomenal. Travis Etienne. And we already knew Cleveland Jacksonville. Jacksonville's defense is where I get some pause. They ranked 12th last year in points allowed, a little worse than that, yards allowed. I look at them and I don't see more than one superstar. I see a relatively middle of the road defense, but I think a middle of the road defense can win you some games when you're going to have a pretty darn dynamic offense. So I think they're ranked right about where they should be, top half of the NFL, but probably not top quartile yet until they prove that defense.
Yeah, I mean, this is the worst division in football in the NFL, so that bodes well for them winning lots of games. I think that they're going to continue to, move forward with, who I think is, top 6-7 quarterbacks in the league and on the way up. He's got weapons. So this team will do well. They'll make the playoffs, obviously, by winning that division. They show that they can win under pressure as well. Doug Peterson, a lot of success with Philadelphia before Jacksonville. So, I think we pegged them right.
Yeah, definitely going to have ample opportunity to use them in Survivor, right? Just by picking them when they're at home in their division. All right, number 11 is the New York Jets. Not bad for a team that was 7-10 last year, but let's be honest. The number one reason why is we see that after getting absolutely horrific QB play last year, we get Aaron Rodgers. We get all his friends, offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, wide receiver Alan Lazard, the corpse that is Randall Cobb. And I guess this means, guys, when I go to ESPN, I will be bringing you guys too as part of my contract. So feel good about that. No, in all seriousness, what do you guys think about this Jet team? where we have them, we see them as a huge improvement over last year.
You know, lots of teams, lots of polls put him in the top 5, which is crazy to me. But, you know, I think part of it's because Robert Saleh and his defensive prowess, you know, especially with Sauce Gardner and what he makes possible. They added Chuck Clark from Baltimore. I think that their defense is going to perform. If Breece Hall can do what it looked like he was going to do last year, and Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, this team is going to be a playoff contender. But is Aaron Rodgers what he was? I don't know. He had a rough season this last year. So I just have a hard time putting them in the top 5. I can understand why people think that they should be in the top 8, and we haven't put them there. What do you think, Gary?
I love this team. I do. I think the New York Football Jets are definitely going to end up in the top 10. I think they've got a better shot than anybody outside the top 5 that we've ranked to end up in the top 5. Look, they had a top 5 defense, an elite defense, and it got better in the offseason with one of the best defensive minds, right, in football coaching them. The only thing is the offense. And again, they have a very good offensive line. Now, you're right, Breece Hall, you guys talked about the ACLs earlier. He needs to come back strong, but he was electric, and I mean electric. He's phenomenal. And running behind that offensive line, I think that's going to be deadly. And don't forget, they have a top 10 wide receiver in football, right, in Garrett Wilson. He's really, really good. Do not sleep on that guy in fantasy and reality and whatever, right? So the fact of the matter is, I love this team. Now, yes, that is predicated on Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers. Do I throw out last year because he didn't even have Romeo Doubs to throw to? He had nobody. I mean, you saw the emergence of Christian Watson. Now, answer me honestly, guys, before the season even started last year, had you heard of the name? Had you heard of the guy at all? Nobody did. Come on. And yet he had I don't want to call it a resurgence. He didn't have anything to begin with, but he had a breakout year, right? It's got to be all because of Aaron Rodgers, right? It's Aaron Rodgers needs one really good receiver, and he can make do. That's what he did in Green Bay all those years. It's what he's going to do with Garrett Wilson in New York. He's going to have a great running game, elite defense, very solid coaching. Tell me why this team can't be a top 5 defense, because I can't, or a top 5 team, because I can't see it. Love this team.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing is, and this is what really hurt them in the first round of the draft, they got jumped by Pittsburgh, and they didn't get the improvement on the offensive line of a superstar from the draft. And I think that's the only concern. Their offensive line is below average. I will move on to number 10. I was sort of hoping we wouldn't talk about this team until the next show, but they appear here, and I think it's the right place for the team to appear. At number 10, the Seattle Seahawks, that were 9-8. So this is my team, so I'll take the first shot, and you guys can rip anything that I'd say. I just think that they're coming off the previous year, that large draft class, which everybody says, led by Tariq Woolen and all the other picks that they had, were really great. They get an extra year to mature, followed by another large draft class this year. This is all thanks to the Russell Wilson trade, all designed to help Geno Smith. First of all, they added Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think it gives them one of the league's best trios of wide receivers because they retained Metcalf and Lockett, and now they have GSN. Gary was bragging about Chris Olave, but it was Jackson Smith-Njigba that actually outperformed him on the same team 2 years ago in college. Also outperformed Garrett Wilson, who Gary also bragged about in the same league. So, and the other thing that I'll say before I'll turn it over to you guys, I'll get to the defense later, is they used a pick on Zach Charbonnet in the second round. And a lot of people are like, why did you do that? You already had Ken Walker. But Charbonnet does everything that Walker doesn't do as well. He's a much better pass receiver than Walker, and he does a much better job at pass protection. He also can do short yardage. and he can be the bell cow back in case Walker actually gets injured. So I'm super excited about my Seahawks. What do you guys think? Bring me back down. I know that's what you guys are going to do. Throw cold water, Michael.
Well, I mean, a lot of it does reside on Geno Smith. I think the comments you made about the receiver core, especially Jackson Smith, I think is very relevant. They even have another receiver coming through who's even better than those three with Marvin Harrison Jr., which maybe is a little bit of insight into what we're going to see out of the quarterbacks that came out. Maybe they aren't quite as good as C.J. Stroud and the Chicago's quarterback aren't quite as good as they appear because the receiver core. But I think the same goes for Geno Smith. Is maybe he's benefiting because of that receiver core, and it's just improved. And I think that's going to be big. So I'm excited for you because of your Seahawks having made the right decision when they made that huge trade of Russell Wilson. I feel like the Jets have a better defense, and so I think that maybe we got those teams wrong here because of your excitement for the Seahawks. But their offense is going to score lots of points this year. So, and they're in a horrible division, obviously other than the San Francisco 49ers. So that's going to help them as well. I think they probably make the playoffs this year. Not sure if they win a game in the playoffs though. Gary?
I think they allowed more than 400 points last year. That needs to change. In order for them to deserve a, top 10 ranking, here we are at number 10, so we can start talking about top 10 ranking. In order for them to deserve a top 10 ranking, they need to change on defense. They got the people to do it. They got the personnel to do it. They've had a very good last 2 years, actually. Off-season trade 2 years ago and the draft class last year. So we'll see. That is definitely possible. I like the offense a lot. Everything to me revolves around that defense and getting much better.
As a Seahawks fan, I'm concerned about our defensive line, even though we added Draymond Jones from Denver. But I think our secondary is improved with the 5th pick overall, Devin Witherspoon, alongside Tariq Woolen. Not going to just be able to throw the ball away from Tariq Woolen all the time. And they got Bobby Wagner back. So hope.
I will say one thing about Devin Witherspoon is I think that they say he's the closest thing to Sauce Gardner. So, I mean, a huge pick with him. So he'll make a difference on that team.
All right. The last team that we talk about in this video is at number 9 is the LA Chargers. They are 10-7. So let's see if they can improve on that. Who'd like to take the Chargers?
Go ahead, Gary.
Sure, no problem at all. I think the Chargers made one of the best offseason changes in football. Right up there with Dan Snyder leaving the Commanders. Right. It's the fact that they just had to get somebody else calling the plays over there. Because my God, their offense had way too much talent to perform as subpar as they did. I saw way too many 4-yard passes over the middle, 2-yard passes out into the flat. They became so utterly predictable. It was just atrocious. I think that a lot resides on their offensive coordinator, but you cannot deny that the Chargers have among the most offensive weapons in football. Their defense needs to show some improvement. I think I've read almost every year that the Chargers have superstars on defense, and yet almost every year they're in the bottom 15. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, and I see absolutely no reason for that to change. And I think if anything's going to be the Chargers' downfall, it's going to be that. But I think much more dynamic offensive play calling from the stars that they already have is just going to be huge. And they're going to need, especially in that division, to outscore teams because, you're facing the Chiefs, even the Broncos, I think, with their improved offensive line. We talked about all that. These are teams you're going to have to outscore because they're going to score some points, especially on a subpar defense. But I think the Chargers deserve the possibility of cracking the top 10 on the offensive prowess alone.
I think what I'll add is they did make some changes on the defensive side. Obviously they've been strong against the pass because of Bosa and Khalil Mack. But their run, I think they were the worst run defense in the league last year, right? Like anyone could run against
32.
them. Okay, and that I think is a huge problem. I think the addition of Eric Kendricks is going to be helpful this year. But you called it. I mean, I think the number one thing they did was adding Kellen Moore. Staley continues to be a head scratcher for me at the head coach position. I can't believe he survived some of those calls that were made last year. He should have been fired. But we'll see if Kellen Moore makes the difference. I think he'll he will. He's a good play caller. So I see this team having a much better season. I think they maybe were the most affected by the injury bug last year. Them and the Niners, and the Niners survived it, but I'm not sure if the Chargers really were able to. So we'll see if that helps out this year as well. Eric, anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, I mean the Chargers are this high because of you two, not me. But it was that run defense that really concerned me. But I just want to quickly highlight the fact that I do think Quentin Johnson was a big pick in the first round at wide receiver to continue to give weapons for Justin Herbert to throw to, because Keenan Allen and Mike Williams have been very injury prone these last few years, right? And to make sure you got a young talent coming up, I think is going to really help that offense. All right. So in this, from 16 to 9 was Minnesota, New Orleans, Detroit, Cleveland, Jacksonville, the New York Jets, Seattle, and the LA Chargers. You gotta click on the video up on your screen now to see who we ranked from 1 to 8. Who was the number one team that we power ranked this year? Until next time, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.